I can't even see my hoodie, parents or supporters. I wore a UFV hoodie, but it just looks like I'm in a hoodie. So I just got to point that out. Anyways, yeah, so these video will be posted on our website. Any questions that are asked in the chat will not be recorded. So Belinda will be asking those questions when they do come in. So if you have any questions, please use the chat and we'll be happy to answer them to the best we can. The real purpose of today's webinar is to really get you to ask any questions you may have, any kind of concerns. We really want to set you folks up to be the supporters that you've always been as your student transitions to University of the Fraser Valley. So with that being said, I know that lots of folks have questions about the impacts to our semester, our fall semester with COVID-19, and that there may be some stress not only for yourselves, but for your student entering this next chapter in their lives, while also dealing with the COVID crisis. So this is an opportunity for any supporter to ask any questions before we get into the formal presentation. We're going to dedicate about 10 minutes to questions related to COVID. Obviously, if there are more, we'll take them, or we can answer them at the end when we have a larger period of time for questions. So at that, I will stop talking for a minute, and if you want, submit your questions to Belinda via the chat.
So someone is asking, are any classes being offered face-to-face for the fall session? And I'll ask Sarah to answer that question and to explain how students will know which parts of a course, or if a course is face-to-face or totally online.
Hi, sure. UFV has announced, as with you'll be familiar, many schools across post-secondary, that primarily will be online for the fall semester. UFV's schedule will note those few courses that will not be delivered online, which are primarily hard sciences and a few labs. And students, when they go to register, will be aware of which of those few courses will still be offered in person. So the schedule, when it's released in a few days, will actually show which mode of instruction is available for students for the classes that they're looking for.
Okay, thank you, Sarah. And if there are any follow-up questions or additional questions, please do submit them in the chat. We'll wait a couple of minutes, and then if there aren't any, we'll go into the formal presentation, and then that'll just give us more time at the end for more Q&A, and I imagine more questions will emerge throughout the session. Someone wants to know if the gym or library will be open in the fall. Greg, do you want to answer that?
Sure, yeah. So really depending on where you are in Canada or internationally, each kind of area is working on different phases. We are currently in BC in phase 2, and the hope is that we'll be shifting to phase 3 at some point in the near future. With that will be some more openings, and so right now our library is closed. However, they put in a lot of energy and effort into access to online digital papers or research articles, as well as ebooks. Our gym is currently closed. However, again, with the shift to hopefully to phase 3 in the next few weeks to months, that there are plans in place to have the library open. They're still trying to figure out how this will be, but the goal is to have the library and to have services out of the recreation department for the fall. Now, that might not mean that students are able to access the in-person gym, but there'll be opportunities from the athletics and rec department to offer those healthy things that people like to do. And that's my full knowledge when it comes to workouts.
I just actually got one more question through the chat. Will final acceptance be offered soon? I think that's a question for Sarah.
Hi, sure. Final acceptance will be very dependent on the application and the program that the student has applied for. So depending on if they still have courses in progress, if they are currently in high school, or if they're a transfer applicant, The best recommendation is for that applicant or that student to actually check their My UFV, and it will tell them what the status of their admission is and if there's anything outstanding. So typically high school students, it's usually into July when those final conditions are removed. For transfer students, it might be a little bit earlier.
Great. Thank you, Sarah.
Okay, I don't have any other questions at this time. Greg, do you want to go into the presentation? And then, like we said, there'll be time for additional questions in the last half of this session. So a good 20 to 25 minutes to answer any additional questions.
Excellent. So yes, this is just a quick overview of some of the potential changes that you may notice as your student transitions into the university and throughout their academic career at UFV. So these are things that may pop up in the next little while, but also may be an impact once your students fully into the academics, and also will also shift once we're back to face-to-face. Knock on wood, that's earlier than later. So one thing to be really aware of as a supporter is there's going to be changes in routine because of the course schedule. So Sarah said that the majority of our courses will be online. There'll be some hybrids and then some in-person, face-to-face from the hard sciences and other lab classes. So your students probably going to have a very different schedule than they currently do if they're coming from, say, direct entry from high school, where it's a very prescribed. They know I'm supposed to be in school from 9 to 3:30. I know what classes I have. In the university setting, that those routines change. Students will access their classes, and then it's really up to them to kind of guide their own schoolwork and their own learning. So it's just something to be really aware of, is that your student may be a night owl, and that changes from high school because they don't have classes until 11 a.m. the next day that they can do their work later on. So just to be aware that routines may change. New friends and interests. I think it's also, this is a huge time for students as they shift into the university and kind of experiment with things, volunteer, try different interests out for the first time. So there will be, new friends and new interests that your student will have opportunities to engage with. And then that just goes back to that balance within their routines. So I know when I was in university, like there was a kind of a rule my mom and I had is I would be home for dinner once a week. And so that was just kind of how we changed our routine. So I was still connected to my family and still was able and still have that freedom to kind of come and go and do the studying and hang out with new friends that I made in class, as well as, do some volunteering and get into some clubs that I was interested in. Students are going to have a lot of opportunities to experiment with new ideas and perspectives. I think it's always really important to say to supporters and to students as they're entering the university is you may come thinking you're going to do X, and you're going to discover along the way that you really are interested in, say, Y. So my example is when I went to university, my plan was I was going to be a police officer, I was going to do criminology, and I was going to be done in 4 years. I think it was 7 years later, I left university with an undergrad in elementary education. So very different from what I thought I was going into university and what I came out with. And it was really through the new friends, the clubs, the volunteering opportunities that I had that I was opened to new understanding, new perspectives, and really shifted where I wanted to put my energy, not only in my personal life, but into my career aspirations. Emerging independence. This is another one that my dear mom and I struggled with. So before, it was 9 to 3:30, I'd be home, and now all of a sudden I have a lot more free time and a lot more independence, not only for myself and my social life, but also within school. And so I think this is really important for supporters to be aware of, as well as students coming into the academic world, that students are going to have a lot more freedom when it comes to studying and to assignments and things like that. So where it was very prescriptive in high school, in university, you're not going to get in trouble if you're late for a class. Well, you might get in trouble if you're late for a class, but you're not going to go to the principal's office. You're not going to go to, or the vice principal or whatnot. So students that miss exams or miss assignments, the professor may reach out and say what's going on, but it's really up to the student to have a good control of their agenda, as well as understanding, like how they work. So there's not going to be someone checking in if a student missed 2 classes. So that can be a little bit of a struggle for folks, especially coming from such a prescriptive world as high school, to having all this freedom. So just, students just need to understand that the limitations have been there's just less limitations on their academics, but with that comes a lot of responsibility on the student. And we have all these supports, the folks that are on the phone as well, or on this call, as well as our student services that we'll get into in a bit, that are all here to make sure that that independence doesn't get a little too out of control. And then finally, adjustment to academic expectations. This can be a big one for folks. Again, where it was very prescriptive in high school, you do X assignment, then you take X assignment, you make it into a short paper. Here in university, there can be all kinds of different assignments, and students may get a little bit of a shock when they come to university, when their grades aren't just as high as they were in high school. All the students that are coming to UFV are probably very good academically, and so this is a bit of a struggle for folks. I can speak to my experience again, is that I did well in high school. I didn't really have any struggles with the content. And then I got my first F in a midterm in Psych 101 in my first semester. And I can remember sitting in the lecture theater being like, oh my gosh, they're going to kick me out. And then I got up, went to my next class, and nothing happened. And so that was a big adjustment for me. It was not only how am I supposed to study, but also, if you do poorly, what are things that you can do afterwards? And so it's a bit of a shock to students that may have had a bit of ease in their high school academics, that there is more hours that you have to put in. And so there's like the line of like 1 hour in lecture equals 3 hours of studying. It's not an exact science, but you can expect that if you're doing like a 3-credit course, that you're going to be looking at probably 10 hours, give or take, maybe a little bit less for studying. Oh, goody. My favorite slide. And I'm glad that I hope everyone is sitting down. I hope no one is on the phone driving right now. This is going to come as a shock, but the University of the Fraser Valley considers your student an adult. So I will let that sit, let that kind of sink in for folks. It can be a bit of a shock, but because of FIPPA, the Freedom of Information and Protection of Privacy Act, we are bound by law that we're not allowed to share information with external folks, with supporters, with family members, with friends. And this is just to keep the privacy of the student, who we consider an adult. So if you were to call my office and say, hey, I'm worried about, John Smith, and I want to know how he's doing in classes, and is he missing classes, I will have to say very gracefully that I cannot confirm nor deny if John Smith is a student at UFV. And that can be tough. We want to know information. So you are, as a supporter, you know your student better than I do, or any of the folks at our university do. So if the caveat there is, if there is concerns about your student, we want to know this information. It's just a matter of what we can share with you. And if there are concerns, there are ways that we can make some connections with supporters. But primarily, all the support, all the services we provide go to the student, and we work with the student regardless of if it's an academic, a personal, a mental health, financial anxiety, whatever it is. There are services in place to make sure that your student is supported while completing their academics. So I won't go through too much of the services. If folks have any questions about the ones that are listed here, these are just kind of the support services that are mostly used by our students, and we kind of put them into different categories. So if folks have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them right now. And maybe I'm going to put Elaine on the spot here. If you could explain the difference between a counselor and an advisor.
Sure, thanks, Greg. Yeah, in high school, students are used to talking to their high school counselor. In university, our counselors are individuals who support them if they have personal issues or if they need some like study skills support and ways in which to enhance those skills. Academic advisors are individuals who support the students through, from admission to their program into graduation. And we often suggest that the student meets with the advisor at least once a year, but we encourage them to even meet once a semester to discuss academic goals, career, personal goals, and then we work with them through their degree or their certificate or their diploma and beyond. So that's the difference between those two services.
Excellent. Thank you, Elaine. The little quiz, I didn't tell her I was going to do that before, but she had such a good answer the last time we met. Yeah, so as you can see, we have all these wonderful services for all students, regardless of, as Elaine was saying, if it's a diploma, a certificate, or an undergrad degree. We are here to support in any way we can. Next slide here, we will see the lovely timeline that our DYU team has developed. So your student will complete the online DYU. They probably have received some emails and a couple texts, and there's all kinds of things going on social media. Brings me joy to see all the new students that are on our social media introducing themselves and kind of saying what they're excited about and what they're interested in. So even in this remote world, it's really lovely to see the UFV community developed around our newest students. And so as Sarah said, in the next couple days, you'll be receiving a timetable. You'll be able to look at your courses and plan your schedule based off of what the indication is of if it's a face-to-face class or a complete remote or some sort of hybrid where there is some in-class work. Get assistance if needed. The Office of the Registrar advising are here for you to assist so your student makes the best decision they can for their first semester and really sets them up for success over the first semester and then throughout their whole career with us. You're going to register for courses in late June or early July. Apply for BC student loans. Lorraine's on the call if folks have any questions about that. And then complete Smart Start. And so Smart Start is our next phase of our orientation programming for our new students. And that will be mainly remote or almost it'll be 100% remote in mid-August till mid-September. And there'll be modules that your student can go through at their own pace that really just highlight, again, the services we have, but how to get ready for that first day of class. Okay. Now it's up to you, fine folks. Do you have questions? And hopefully we can answer them for you.
There's someone in the chat. Okay. Can you register for courses before you receive your final acceptance? So Sarah Graham, our Associate Registrar, is saying, so you can register for courses before you receive final acceptance, but you or your student must have been offered admission, and in some cases you will need to have been accepted. And if a student has questions about the status of their admission to a particular program, we encourage them to contact the Office of the Registrar directly. And so that contact information will be on the slide at the end of this session. Yes, and we are offering, as part of the online DYU, we're offering online registration sessions. Your students can sign up for them the same way that you accessed or signed up for this session. Okay, I have another question. Can you answer any questions about living on campus in residence? We were told that housing is extremely limited due to COVID-19. Will more rooms be opening up for the fall? So I'll get Greg to answer this question, please.
Yeah, that's a great question. We have finalized our Baker House, which is we have one building on campus for housing, and so we finalized the number, and so we're at a 50% occupancy rate for fall, meaning we'll be having about 100 students living on campus. I would recommend, if you haven't already done so, to put in your deposit and to register to see if to get on the wait list. I know we are operating on a wait list. However, that may change drastically depending on who is able to come back into the country based off of our international students. So we do have a number of international students that have already applied, but if there are limitations on access to Canada, that will change. So I would highly recommend, if you can, to apply to live in Baker House. We're also just in the finalizing to have a off-campus kind of what do you call it, classified for renters, we're using a company that does all the assessments and make sure that landlords are on the up and up, and it's a pretty cool system. So that will eventually be coming online probably in mid-July to early August. So that's another great way to find a place, especially if you're not from the area. It can get a little confusing with all the towns that are kind of connected.
How will students know about when and how to register for a class? Sarah, Graham, do you want to answer that one?
Sure. Registration will begin July 2nd, and students will have received an email. They should have received it yesterday, informing them to check their My UFV. That will tell them their date and time, their earliest date and time of registration. So they'll need to check their email, and that will have that will direct them to their My UFV. That will tell them the date and time that they're going to register. But the earliest possible days will be July 2nd.
Exciting.
And we would really encourage your student to come to the registration webinar, because we go over a lot of this really detailed information during that webinar. There's one tomorrow.
Great, thank you. We also have another question. I love this question. How about textbooks? Are those still a thing? Are they online now, or is there a place they will be available for purchase?
So yeah, we have one of these very antique bookstores. So we do actually have a bookstore on campus. So they'll be offering, I think it's going to be curbside. So you can order online and your student can pick it up. I'm also aware that a lot of faculty are looking at other options, so either ebooks or things that students can get without having to physically buy a book. So yes, there are some courses that the majority of courses will have textbooks or books that they'll have to purchase. But I know there is a shift happening, and this would be before COVID, to more online sources or ebooks in that way. But yeah, we still have old school books here.
And just related to that, once you are registered for courses, and in August, since most of the courses will be online, in our online orientation Smart Start, you'll learn how to access Blackboard, which is our online learning system. And then you'll learn how to go into your courses and see the syllabus. And that's where your textbooks or your course reading materials will be listed. And it usually indicates what you'll need to buy. So that information usually isn't available until towards the end of August, early September now, probably. And so we encourage students to often get excited about buying their textbooks. Some are nerds like me and started reading at the start of August. But sometimes the reading list for a course changes based on changes in availability to certain textbooks. So we encourage students just to wait until the course opens up, or until they have that first class, and then just to get the final reading list, and then they can order their textbooks. And so that's just something to keep in mind. For this year
different
too.
World now, but I can remember buying all my textbooks early and then taking them all to class on the first day. So, and yeah, Belinda's laughing at me. That's a high school response. I don't know what book I need on the first day, so I bring all my books. Here or in university, that's not the case. So it seems odd, but your student can wait until they've had that initial class with their faculty member to get a sense of, have the books changed? They usually don't, but they might. And, is it important to get all of them? Sometimes you can find used books that might be an older version. And then that's a great thing to ask on the first day. Hey, I found version 3. I know we're reading version 4. Is the information still accurate? So just some tips.
we wanted to turn this over to you. We have ideas about what we think supporters need to know, but then we realized really we want this time to be valuable for you. So we don't want to talk at you for more than than is necessary. So yeah, if you don't have any additional questions, or if they're just not coming up for you right now, you're welcome to contact the experts who are in the room here at the email addresses listed on this slide. Or you can also contact orientation@ufv.ca. My colleague checks that email and we'll be able to connect you or your supporter to the right resource.
And that's one thing I would say is, yeah, it can be very difficult, especially in this environment where you're not on campus. I've just been talking to a blank screen for the last 40 minutes. So my computer might be off and I don't know if anyone can hear me. But I will say what comes through at University of Fraser Valley is that students are students and they're known by their name as well as our staff and faculty. So if a student is having an issue, it's not go see someone in the advising center, it's go see Bobby, the advisor. And that goes for all our services. So students don't get lost, as you may see at larger institutions where just because of their size, they are seen as a number. I'm pretty proud of the support network we have in place so that I can get on the phone with anyone that's listed here or any of the folks that work in these areas and get an answer and can assist the student relatively quickly or get them to the person that can assist the student quickly. So just a little plug for UFV.
As Greg mentioned at the start, we have recorded this session. So if you want to relive the glory, this will be posted on or if your student wants to also hear any of these answers, this video will be posted on our DYU website. And then we'll be following up with your student about supporting them over the summer and into September with other orientation programming, online programming. Yes, we don't have any other questions at this time. Greg, do you want to wrap things up?
Sure, yeah, I want to thank everyone that was able to attend. Again, if you have any student-specific questions, please have your student contact either orientation@UFV or info@UFV. If students have specific questions about registration, advising, or financial aid and awards, you can see the contact information there. So please fire off any questions that you may not have thought of in the last 40 minutes to any of these emails, and we'll be able to get the answers for you. And I just want to say thank you again for spending a bit of time with us, and I'm hopeful in the next little while that we will be able to greet and meet our supporters in the way that we usually do at UFE, as well as initiating and getting our newest students on board and ready for their first year. So thank you very much.